Wherever you're joining us from, welcome. We're so happy to have you. My name is Alyssa Nichol and my co-host,
Catherine Grayson Nance.
We are so excited to be talking about everything front end today. Catherine, you want to do a bit of an intro for the stream and then we can round robin the people?
Absolutely. So yeah, we have traditionally in the past done a results stream for the State of JavaScript. And this year we were like, there's so much more to talk about. We love doing State of JS. We're going to touch on it. But also, there's the State of Designer Developer Collaboration, the Web 8 Million, the State of React. Like, there's all these other... Figma has a Design Developer Survey. There's so much going on in the front-end space beyond just JavaScript. And so we really wanted to broaden our horizons this year. And so, of course, for Valentine's Day, we love front-end. So we've gathered everyone together to talk about literally everything. We're not going to be able to cover everything, but we're going to do our best. And so we'll hop around for about the first half hour. We're going to talk about JavaScript. Then we're going to talk about design, UI, UX. Then we're going to pop into accessibility for a little bit. And of course, there's going to be some overlap between all of those because that's what the front end is all about. But that's our hope. And hopefully you stick around and enjoy all of the discussion.
So I think let's do, Catherine and I are up here and we're going to go just down in like a big down zigzag. So Rainer, would you like to go first for your intro?
Yes, of course. So also, hello. I'm honored to be here. I'm Rainer from Angular Architects, coming from Austria. And as the name says in my headline, I'm more focused on the Angular part. So I will join here for the JavaScript thing. And then I'll just, go back a little bit and just listen. What you want to share.
Thank you for coming so much. Michelle, will you go next, darling?
Sure. My name is Michelle Bakels. I'm an organizer of React Miami conference and also work at G2I as a program director. And so, like Rainer said, as my title suggests here, I'll be probably contributing more to the React side of this conversation, but also just excited to hear everyone's thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Laura, you're up.
Hi, I'm Laura Kalbag. I've been a designer and a front-end dev for about 16 years professionally, and my special area of interest is accessibility, but really anything that's to do with respecting people's rights online as well. And as someone who's a designer and dev, I'm particularly interested in the collaboration side of things. So that is my bag.
Amazing. Thank you. Nora?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nora. I work with Alyssa and Catherine, and I'm part of the product marketing team at Progress. But also with Catherine, we created the Designer Developer Collaboration Survey last year. So I'm here to talk a bit about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Nora. And Sander, last but certainly not least.
Hi, I'm Sander. I'm a long-time developer. I'm doing front-end since it was invented. I'm doing Angular since it was invented. Awesome. The same for CSS, JavaScript, and all kinds of other things. I'm here for the web performance for Angular and for general CSS, HTML, and so on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So we are kicking off with talking about specifically, I think, do we want to do State of JavaScript first or Angular first, Catherine? What should we?
Either way. Okay. Whatever you're feeling moved. What you got in your... You put together a lovely little slideshow, I believe. Do you want to share that?
I do. So
dive in?
The State of JavaScript is a chunky monkey survey that the amazing Sasha Grief does every year. And it covers like everything under the JavaScript umbrella. And he's constantly adding in, like this year, for instance, the AI section that was asking about AI tooling and other AI things in web. So constantly trying to keep up essentially and add in things as they become relevant. And so I just had some random findings from things that I thought were like highlights of the survey, but Catherine also has the actual survey. I'm going to pop over real quick to it. The actual survey. And if you are new on to the front end world, welcome. Hello. This is the State of JavaScript survey that we're speaking of and referencing. I feel like we should just like show it first. So, and what's the URL for that? Is it like stateofjs.com or what's her URL?
2024.stateofjs.com.
Okay. Excellent. And so some things, and at any point, please interject. We have an amazing group of brilliant people with us. Some highlights that I thought were noteworthy. Tooling leader of Vite and Vite Test, where Vite was the most adopted technology with like year over year usage increase. And Vite Test had the highest retention rate. And then roll down was also mentioned in tooling. And so I don't know, Catherine, should we like chunk it or like should I just like hear the findings? Does anyone have anything interesting?
I say this is a free for all and everyone should jump in. I
Yes!
was fighting back, being like, I'm not surprised to see Vite moving on up. Like,
Yeah.
especially in the React world, we've seen the official deprecation of Create React App, right? Which was one of the like previously fast ways to kind of do a roll your own React app. A lot of that is kind of starting to fade in favor of more full-bodied frameworks like Next, but Vite is one of the best ways to still do a roll your own. And so seeing that move up to kind of claim the space that CRA has abandoned or opened up with its demise is not shocking to me. It's my tool of choice. Maybe I'm biased. And that's why I'm like, I'm not surprised to see Vite doing well. I love Vite. Like,
Yeah, I think Vite is doing a lot of good work, and I love seeing roll down there. I think within a couple of months we are more talking about roll up, which is basically the Rust version of roll down. I think in this category of tooling we will see more and more frameworks unite behind Vite and Vite Test and the whole thing. At least that is my hope, because I don't like tooling. I love tooling. At the same time, I hate tooling because it always gets in the way when you quickly want to do something. At the other hand, tooling like the Angular CLI make your life so much easier. Also, without it, it saves you so much time. So it's a love-hate relationship. I love it until it gets in the way, which is quite often. But yeah.
Right. It's great as long as whatever you want to do is exactly aligned with the opinions of that other thing, right? And then
yeah, I'm of the opinion that all other opinions don't matter.
I like that opinion.
Yeah, so from my side, I will also say it's not really a big surprise, and I'm quite happy that we have a tooling leader, because in the end, as Sander kind of said, I don't want to kind of have a choice or a selection. I mean, with the Angular CLI, we get an opinionated kind of tooling already, but there should be something which kind of the ecosystem kind of supports out of the box. And I see that Vite is going to be that thing. And I also like it that from the Angular team, they very kind of 1 or 2 years ago, they decided that they also want to go kind of closing their gap to Vite, and also make it possible that maybe someday the Angular CLI and Vite just work together, build mode, dev mode, which is already happening in a way. But yeah.
I did see we have one more guest that popped in while we were getting ready. So let me go ahead and add in Kathleen real fast. Hey, Kathleen, I'm so glad you're here.
Hello. Audio test. Everything working?
Yes, I think
Sweet.
so. Let me...
We're getting an echo from our audio into your room, feeding back in. I don't know. It's very...
So my room is echoing? Is my room...
Hello, test. Yes, Kathleen's room is picking up the stream audio.
Sorry to mute you by force. But
No.
It was just a quick way of proving.
Well, let's keep it moving in the meantime. Kathleen, give us a thumbs up when you're ready for us to bump you back on, and we'll do another test.
What I found a little bit of surprising, and also I like a lot, someone is typing really hard, is that Angular is the most talked about. That is surprising.
Oh, yeah.
I love it though.
That was there were two Angular things. One was Angular receiving the most comments from respondents. And then there was one specific chart, I should have screenshot it, where it was like, interest in libraries and frameworks, and it was kind of a weird like dot smearing chart, and Angular was like up and a lot of everything else was down, and it was just like a exciting time for the Angular people, because I know for a long time, Catherine, I muted you, by the way, because of the typing. I didn't want you to be speaking.
No,
and then you didn't know, and I was like,
what happened. You muted me, and I was like,
excellent, perfect, beautiful.
For switching to a clicky keyboard.
But for a long time, Angular just kind of has been the underdog, especially with the State of JavaScript survey and with that demographic that it was reaching. So to see some like hype about Angular not in the Angular space was very exciting, as well as Analog. The Angular meta framework received the most written in answers like overall. So I thought that was really cool. Any comments on this section before we?
Yeah, I was really interested to see this too. Being in the React world, like the narrative for the last handful of years is that it replaced Angular and Angular's on the way out, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're right. You look at that chart that Sasha put together of adoption and retention, and he did point out that Angular was one of the only frameworks that's bucked the boomerang trend of adoption. And when we were reading this like Angular 2025 strategy, I saw this term that I hadn't seen before, but I think is totally accurate, which is like the Angular Renaissance. Yeah. And I think that's so cool. But yeah, it's really fascinating how the Angular team kind of like doubled down and we're like, no, we're not replaced, we're not out. And they shared their strategy, which included like increasing developer satisfaction and enabling the adoption of their latest features. So it seems like they're really, really focused on the future and getting more people into the Angular ecosystem, not just sustaining where it is currently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was hard to be behind the scenes with Angular because for the last 5 years, the GDEs have been aware of the direction it was going. I think we stalled out for a while whenever we were rewriting the view engine, and there wasn't much movement on the developer experience side. It was just a behind the scenes thing, but it was like the month of that we had the new that we replaced our view engine and we were moving forward, and it was like the Angular team was like, so here are the next 5 features you should expect. And they've just kind of been like bulldozing through this feature list that they were looking forward to getting once the groundwork was written. So I'd love to hear like anyone else's thoughts on, we can talk a bit about Angular and hop back over to the JavaScript survey. But I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think this Ivy transition, the new renderer that has always been the big promise from the Angular team. Look, you need to be patient with us, but there is a lot of things that we have to do under the hood. You will not gain anything. You will not see anything except that we are replacing the complete framework. But once we have achieved this, then we will be able to ship new features very quickly. Yeah. And this period lasted 3.5 years. So some of the people became a little bit impatient, but now we see they kept their promise and it really pays off.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely been interesting because I'm not on the Angular side, obviously, but Alyssa is, and Alyssa has been banging the drum on the Angular Renaissance for a while, which is why I laughed a little, not like at Michelle be like, I hadn't heard of the Angular Renaissance, but I was like, yeah, me neither, except for Alyssa.
Poor Catherine, because we'll be in marketing meetings and the marketing team will be like, so what should we do? And I'm like, have you heard about Angular? And Catherine's like in the background going, oh.
But it has been really interesting as an outsider to kind of watch that come into its own. And like, yeah, because there were, I'm going to go ahead and say like years possibly where Alyssa was like, it's coming, Angular Renaissance, get ready. And I was like, okay, girl. Yeah. Here it is. She was right. She was so right.
Some of the things that, because this chart was from the Angular developer survey, and we can link to, like, it's on the Angular blog where Minko from the Angular team goes through the survey results. But this was a specific chart that I pulled up where it was talking about the satisfaction per like feature or per like thing that you're working with inside of Angular. And so you can see that a lot of our new things like control flow or deferrable views, standalone components, where the satisfaction was completely positive. And then I had this areas for improvement because forgive me, Rainer and Sander, I forget all the things I'm allowed to talk about and I'm not allowed to talk about. So I'm just going to vaguely say that I'm pretty positive everything in the improvements area is slated for 2025. And you can totally hold me responsible for that if it doesn't happen. So
Can you go back to the...
Yeah. This guy or the... Okay.
This the interesting one.
The RxJS is really the interesting one in here. Because...
Wait, interesting as in you disagree, or interesting as in you're
No,
yes.
It was a bit surprising for me that on the total responses, most dislikes were going to RxJS.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I like RxJS, but it's a heavy tool that should not be handed to light developers. But in Angular, you have to. And that is kind of a problem in Angular. And that problem is basically gone. And pretty soon it will be gone completely.
Yeah.
Right now it's gone-ish. You can see that you don't really need RxJS anymore if you are going to use Angular. And if you need it, it's still there and you can still use it, and it will be fully supported by the framework, but it will not be mandatory anymore pretty soon.
I think what you just said, and what Michelle mentioned about where is this Angular Renaissance coming from, and how we were saying it was 3.5 years that Rainer mentioned of rewriting the view or the Ivy, and so I think it was kind of a topic that came up with GDEs where they were asking the Angular team, are you guys going to slow down? Because we have a lot of new stuff that we're out here working hard to promote and advocate for. And they were no, if anything, we're going to go faster. So I'm excited, but I'm also okay, the Angular, if you took a big long nap and woke up, a year from now, it's going to be the landscape of Angular will be different, but the performance and the developer experience is going to be amazing. I'm just so grateful that they took that time to be backwards compatible. And you were saying, if you need the old RxJS, if you still need to use modules, right, that they made a way forward that wasn't completely the 1.0, 2.0 rewrite.
Yeah, well, modules are really on the way out, and I expect they are going to be deprecated, and I hope soon rather than late.
You think so? I mean, because I was talking with the team and they were it would take so long to remove all the modules completely 100% from the Google, the Google apps that are using Angular.
I think they're pretty much gone there.
You think so? You think they put a big push? Because that would be amazing for Angular to move faster if we could move forward without.
Modules are in the way for a couple of things still. And it will take a while. It's not 2021 that modules are deprecated and you cannot use them in 22. But it will. I hope it will be soon. If you're an Angular developer and you're using modules, prepare to remove those things. Start moving away from modules. Start moving towards standalone components.
I wanted to pull this up because I thought this was fascinating. Because again, all these surveys that we talk about today, you have to keep in mind out of the people who took the survey, because it's not definitive for every Angular developer. But out of all the Angular developers that took the survey, 90% of them were already using standalone components, directives, and pipes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's a really high percentage. And it looks totally different than last year this time. Same thing with control flow. 80% are utilizing the built-in control flow features. And 79% of developers reported using the latest 2 major versions, which is in my mind, crazy. You have to update if you want to get some of these latest features. So it's kind of there's a big push to upgrade. But also, I don't know, Sander and Rainer, did you expect this as far as versioning?
Nope.
I was the last 2 versions, almost 80%.
No, but I'm not sure who's actually doing this developer service. Yeah. Because I was also very surprised, as Sander said, about this very bad kind of comments about RxJS.
Oh, RxJS.
Because we also have to know that in Angular, there are a lot of folks around who are passionate about RxJS. And I was expecting the same negativity also for signals. And you see there is nothing red in signals, everything's green. So
it is interesting because Signals is not, for those who aren't aware, like the Signals API isn't finished by any means. Like they're still rolling out plans for additional like features for Signals or Signal components and other things that are coming like with routes and things. So
I think I want to update your comment a little bit.
Oh,
Signals are ready. Signals are done and they are ready and they are good to go. The implementation of Signals everywhere in the framework is what is still going on.
Yes.
So some parts of the integration into the framework are still being worked on, like resource and other things. But Signals themselves are stable and ready for prime time. So
I feel like we need to, like Sander and Rainer and anybody who like does the Angular conferences, we need to do our own little like secret booth survey, you know, like try to gather more data, be like, what version are you on? There's
undercover Angular information.
There's like scribbles in notebook. Okay, version 17. Cool. Yeah.
I will jump in a little bit. We've had some good comments from our chat, so I do want to throw some of those up. First up, just some folks saying, hey, good to see some of our regulars back at it. We did get, I will say, a correct and valid call out on our Angular slide with red and green. And since we are going to talk about accessibility, I feel like it is only fair to own that we did put a deeply inaccessible table up. I do think you grabbed that from the Angular survey itself.
Oh yeah, this one.
But yeah, it was a little funny that they chose red and green.
Oh no.
Specifically.
Oh no.
Well, I think, to be honest, from an accessibility perspective, the red is actually just highlighting the negatives, whereas the green is highlighting the positives. So that's not inaccessible, but it is hard to distinguish. I think the light grey text is always a bigger issue. And
Also
we kind of, I'd say that probably the most important thing is actually reading what the stuff is on the slide. If people can't see it, then that's the major content they're missing out on, is what are the features and what are the numbers.
Nope.
That's assuming you can see color. It's assuming you can see color, though. Like if the other bars, had a pattern on them.
Zero marking, it would definitely be better if it was in different colors, but it's probably readable even if it's all in gray. It's not great though, and mostly though I just had to have a laugh at, like, here we are kicking ourselves in the face immediately.
Absolutely. I know, I thought she was talking about this slide. I was like, oh no, it isn't high contrast. I apologize deeply for the tiny print and the low. Yes.
No, very good call, Heather.
Allow me to put on some glasses to read.
I know.
My assistive technology.
I'm sorry, you don't have a desk magnifying glass?
Yeah, you're not using a screen magnifier to watch every stream?
I know. It was very bad of me. I apologize. I was like, let's cram every statistic on one screen.
We also have another vote here to have somebody else who kind of felt like React took over. So it is interesting to see that balance. It's Angular's kind of got its own, like, very steady, very involved base, and then React is like, whoop. It's really interesting to see. And I got to go to NGConf last year, which was really cool. Again, as an outsider, I mostly just got to work the booth and go, interesting, love to hear it. But yeah, to see, like, we don't think about it because React has eaten the world. It's become, whatever, the darling. But that doesn't mean that that's what everyone's using. It just means that that's what's getting yapped about.
I think React has a lot of hype and a lot of marketing, but people that are building a little bit more advanced applications there is a set in the graph we were talking about. There was the satisfaction about React, which was dipping down tremendously. I think the people came to the point where they had to build larger applications.
I want to find where you're talking about.
It's the road
dipping
graph.
Down tremendously. Where was that? Let me find
It's in the same graph where Angular was up. I don't know if
The one with all the balls
like
and they
that.
were moving
Yeah,
and it was
the one where
very...
Angular was doing really well. That's the one where React was doing really bad.
Oh, these kind of graphs, these like graphs
one?
right here. Oh my gosh, well, because you see Angular going up and then like Webpack going down, and that pretty much sums up what I know about.
Mhm.
There is still some space to the right for Angular, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to do some more work here as Angular
yes.
as Angular. But if you like React and it works for your application, it's fine. I had some professional encounters with React, and let me say I understand React less now than I did before, or the popularity of it. But that is my personal experience, and that doesn't say much.
I have a random React question that kind of pertains to, because I saw Storybook and then I was like thinking design wise, is React commonly linked with, because I know there are things on the rise for tooling and for the design part. Is it commonly linked with anything that you can definitively say, or is it still like very broad, build your own story for your web app? Like, would you say, oh yeah, if you're using React, you're definitely using this today for sure? No. Kathleen was giving me kind of a wobble.
I'm thinking, what do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of understand the question, because to me, I don't think it's maybe I just don't understand the question, but there's nothing really like narrowly scoped about the React ecosystem, in my opinion. I think that's kind of the appeal of it, is that you can really build anything with React. I would say if there was like a purpose for the downward trend of React recently, I don't know if it's really necessarily the rise of any other framework so much as the changes to React very recently. I think that personal opinions aside, just objectively looking at the ecosystem, there are some changes that the community, the global community, which is massive now, by the way, like it very almost seemingly impossible to manage, like is not fully on board with, and has kind of fragmented the community a bit. And I think the biggest change or introduction, I think, that has kind of split React developers is the adoption of RSCs. So everybody's still trying to get on board with that and figure out. Somebody wrote in the comments, downward trend because CRA is dead and Next.js is kind of tailored for Vercel. Yeah. So Next.js, that's another thing. They kind of like adopted a lot of the upcoming React trends early in their own meta framework. So it's just been a bit of a roller coaster the last couple of years in the React world, to be honest.
When you, Michelle, when you said that there were kind of updates that came out that were polarizing, was that like 2 years ago, 1 year? Like, when did those changes start?
I would say just recently in the last couple of years. I think this a concept of server components and server-side rendering and client-side rendering and having new directives for your files. I think we saw that first, in the React world with Next.js. Next.js kind of like bit the bullet, and we're like, we're gonna introduce this on a major scale first. And it's just kind of like, I don't know.
Rollout.
The rollout was
RSCs were interesting and a good idea, but the way they were introduced was a struggle. And it made me laugh, Alyssa, because you were like, when would you say that happened? And it was like, oh my God, if you had to pinpoint a date when RSCs rolled out.
Which Next.js conf was it?
Because they've only just become official in React 19, which came out in December, right? So like technically 2 months old, but also 2 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could have done a better job with communication and like a more unified rollout. It was I understand why Next.js wanted to like jump ahead and like leverage this experimental tech, and the rollout did take a long time, but I think it left a lot of devs kind of in this middle ground of like, well, should I jump over and try to adopt that? And if I do, then does that mean I have to use Next? And if I don't, then like, what does that look like? I'm hopeful I'm optimistic about this year being a better one, a more unifying one, because now that they are in the whatever standard build, safe build, no longer experimental, we are seeing other meta frameworks pick them up. And I think that once there are kind of multiple paths in, and it's not like you have to be in Next to be using this, we'll see more people play with them and get comfortable with them and figure out if or where they fit in their own dev environment. But I'll tell you that even myself, while they were in experimental mode, I was like, I don't know that this is a problem for Catherine yet. Like, I think I'm gonna wait this one out until they're stable.
I think that's honestly a lot of wisdom there. I think there was and has been, and we probably still should worry about it in the Angular community, where we start something is definitely experimental and we're so excited about it and we're like, hey, we know the API isn't stable, but
I'm too old to hop on every trend. I can't live like that anymore. I gotta wait. This has got to be secure, stable, tested, ready before I'm willing to really.
You're starting to sound like a .NET girly. That's what I'm hearing.
Ooh. Wow.
Okay. I've got a lot of cool .NET girlies that I know. That was a compliment, ma'am. Settle down.
It sure didn't sound like one. No, that's fair. I probably would fit it over there. All right. React is too cool for me now. I gotta tell you, I'm not cool enough to hang with the React kids these days.
I will say that I do think that there was a course correction, and I think that it is a positive future. It was a rocky few years, but I do think that it's a positive future. People are starting to figure out kind of how it works, what it means, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the React team coming back and doing an in-person conference in Vegas last year, and kind of from their own perspective, talking about the upcoming changes, like you're not getting these updates through different companies or different, meta frameworks adopting things. They got to present it in their own words, on their own terms. I think that helped a lot.
Yes,
oh, that's awesome.
That was hugely, even just for understanding the concepts, I felt very lucky to be there and get to hear some of them break down RSCs and how they work and kind of the tech behind it. It felt less like black box to me. And it was like, oh, okay. Now I'm back in. Like, cool. Thank you. Yes. So we'll get there. I'm optimistic. 2025.
Can I quickly jump in? Would you say that these days it is more normal for React developers to start already with the meta framework, or is it yes? Okay.
Yeah. That is, I think, the official recommendation in the new React docs.
Okay.
They do still give you alternate options, but if I remember that page correctly, it tells you to start with a meta framework, and then there's like an expandable accordion section that's like, what if I want to roll my own? But it's like you have to open it to see. So I think their strong recommendation at this point is to pair with a meta framework, especially for newbies.
But the React team itself doesn't release a meta framework, right?
Yeah,
I don't think so. Do they?
A standalone library. So they're just like, but we pair well with. So it's kind of like a wine and tasting menu. If you like this, you might like this. We suggest.
I see. So I think we're over time for my Angular guests. And if you guys had to go, I wanted to give you a moment to hop in and say anything else about predictions or excitement for Angular or JavaScript in general, or anything front end. Because I don't know if you can stick around, Sander, but I know Rainer has to hop.
I guess. Yeah, no, for me in general, as I said, that the biggest advantage or the biggest leap that Angular did the last few years was this kind of cooperation with the Wiz framework inside of Google, and that Google really has this interest or the intention, let's put it like this, that they want to kind of see Angular maybe in 5, 6, 7 years powering Google search. I think this is a huge commitment for everyone who's kind of doubts if Angular will still be available in the future. I think that's a clear answer to that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, Rainer. Sander, are you sticking around, or do you want to do a final?
No, I'm sticking around, but
excellent.
I think for JavaScript, we are going to see a huge move in the entire community outside of Angular also do signals. Signals is going to be the next big thing.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye, Rainer.
Thanks for having me, and have a nice restful event. Bye.
There was one thing I wanted to highlight before we moved on from JavaScript that I thought was wild, and I'm gonna try and find it now. There it was. In the State of React, and I think in the State of JavaScript, they collect years of experience, and they were talking about how over half, the majority of respondents to the survey are around 33-ish, right? So I am the target audience. But that means, by extension, that they have 10 or less years of experience, meaning that they never knew a world without React, which is itself 12 years old, which is wild.
Yeah. I mean, that's my Angular story, right? I've never known JavaScript without Angular. So.
Right. Similarly, yeah, State of JS, they frame it slightly differently. It said a majority of survey takers haven't known the world before modern JavaScript frameworks, which was like, whoo, like I'm in that bucket. And also it felt wild to see it framed that way. Like I didn't code for the web before that, but I do remember the web before that. And that's crazy to think about, that we're now in an age where most developers have never known anything besides this.
Yeah, that's so strange.
I think when you're looking at the demographics, I do think it is notable to look at the gender demographics that they have on both the State of React and State of JS surveys, which is kind of horrifying. And maybe it just speaks to how many people respond to these surveys and who is more likely to respond to a survey. But I'm pretty sure there are more than 8% non-men working in development.
Yeah.
I hope this panel is representative.
Oh.
Well, all right. Did anyone else notice the math error?
Wait, where? Wait,
well,
here? Here?
No, I was not in gender. I was looking at like age respondents, like how many people, responded with their age versus how many people responded with years of experience.
Age.
And I was adding up the numbers and I'm like, wait, did some of y'all start when you were 5? Because it's like
I know a few programmers who would say that. Who would be like,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. The other piece I would say here is that none of the questions in the State of JS are mandatory, if I remember correctly. So you could easily choose not to share your age, which feels like a personally identifying piece of information, but possibly choose to share your years of experience.
Do we have
vice versa?
Total number that answered age, or I guess we'd have to add the side column, because I know that I think it was 14,000 people total.
So a little.
Oh, up there, yeah.
Yeah, 10K, 10.8. Yeah, versus 11. So there is a gap of not statistically significant, probably about 200, 250 people that answered years of experience, but not age.
Meta comment is that I am more and more impressed every year with how much data Sasha manages to show in a great way, with a great visual
masterclass in data viz.
Unbelievable what he can do. And I love the comments feature too. I've read so many comments from survey respondents. It's really amazing what he put together.
It really is. The Angular team was talking about why they didn't share the data, the direct data of theirs, and they just shared a summary. And it was because there was so much additional comments and extra things to grok, and that they didn't have this kind of essentially what Sasha's built to process all that data and to display it in a way that makes sense easily. And so I'm very, very happy for this tool.
I will say on a later note, the comments always crack me up because I do open the comments, and if it's tool related, the top comments are always F this thing. There's always.
I wondered if he censored out anything, but I guess not. What?
No,
there it is.
I guess not in the comments themselves. Certainly, the report itself is condensed and censored. If you choose to read the free-form answers, and I do believe you can report them if any of them are truly horrific, but most of them are just I expletive hate this thing. I can't believe anyone uses this. So
what I don't like on those things is that personally, I'm most of the times in the smallest bar.
Oh, you're saying as far as results, you're grouped with the smallest?
I'm always in the smallest bar.
And there's also some truth, right? That especially with years of experience and age, this kind of survey targets a very specific demographic, and it's people of about 30-ish years who are very online. And there are a lot of developers that are not 30 years old and terminally online. I'm not one of them. Tell me what it's like, developers that are not terminally online. But there's a huge section of people who use these tools that are not represented in these surveys. And I feel like anytime we talk about the results, we got to throw an asterisk on there and be like, but this ain't it.
I have been part in different communities, and there are a lot of communities where I am considered a youngster. So...
Yep.
I like the emphasis on years of experience that I think is becoming more popular in surveys as well compared to age. I think it's probably a much more valuable marker and statistic to have. Yeah. And it is also kind of anti the ageism side of things in that it is showing the value of people that have experience over it just being about being a young person.
Also, it can be I'm nothing saying a number, because I know people that have 2 or 3 decades of experience and are still junior level. And I know people that have 2 years experience, and I go whoa, I'm going to follow this guy or girl.
Yeah. Well, and Napalm in the chat brings up a good point, right? A lot of people double dip, and folks like backend engineers that use some of these front end tools probably don't respond to the 100 question plus state of JavaScript, because that's not their main.
Intense. Yeah.
It's not for them, or they don't see themselves as part of that audience.
Yeah, but and it takes a special kind of people to answer all of those questions for free.
Yeah.
Something I want to add here is that I usually look to the Stack Overflow survey for comparison as the golden standard. And it's interesting that in Stack Overflow, people who have coded up to 4 years professionally are 32%. So it seems like the JavaScript community is a little bit, there are fewer inexperienced developers than in the general developer community. I don't know if that says much, but I guess there are a lot of developers starting with different technologies other than JavaScript.
JavaScript is the bucket that catches everyone at the bottom. Inevitably, you will have to write something in JavaScript. You probably won't like it, but you will have to do it. All right. Should we put a bow on our JavaScript section?
I think so.
I'm sure we'll still talk about JavaScript because we're front end folks. But we have other exciting things to talk about in the world of design. Do you have a slide for that, Alyssa? Or
I did not. I don't think so.
That's
but
cool.
I can.
We don't need one.
I can pull up the website though if you'd like.
I've got it. Which
excellent.
Which website? Hold on. Let me. Wrong window. I'm not qualified to work this thing. So we had a couple design developer surveys that we wanted to look at. One was the State of Designer Developer Collaboration, which we're very lucky to have Nora with us, who wrote and put together the vast majority of this survey. So we get to pick the brain of the survey creator. And then we've also got the Figma Designer Developer Workplace Collaboration and AI Trends, which is possibly the longest name of any of those surveys that we talk about. But Nora, I know you have been super deep in this data. That's probably underselling it. So is there anything you want to highlight from this that you thought was super interesting? Or
Yeah. First, I want to give credit to Figma because the angle of this survey got inspired by their 2024 survey, where they started with a slide that said the designer-developer relationship might just be the most important relationship in web development. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I really wanted to dig into that and explore, because there aren't that many surveys. Actually, I don't think there's another survey with the same angle. So we wanted to contribute to that pool of knowledge. And I want to start with one of the biggest, the most interesting findings we had. Kathleen, I don't know if you're sharing the PDF. It's on page 19, or the second slide with the it's among, yeah. So we asked developers what are the main challenges in their designer-developer process, and they listed a bunch of challenges. The biggest challenge being slow down time to market. But then we split the answers between developers and designers. And what really stood out is that 36% of developers say no challenges, it's a smooth process. But only 10% of designers thought that. So it seems like designers have it worse. Like maybe they experience more of the edges, of the downsides of the process. Maybe they get more frustrated that their designs don't reach the real world as intended. But I really want to dig into this discrepancy in this year's survey, the follow-up, because it's really interesting. I don't know if any of you have thoughts around that.
I'd love to see how much crossover there is between that and I think the ratio of designers to developers. And I wonder if the designers that are struggling the most are those that are having to get work done with a huge quantity of developers. Because I think you said between 1 to 6 and 1 to 15 designer and developer relationship ratio. And that seems like a lot of developers to be working with, like 16.
So we actually did also cross-section where we asked, how do you describe the quality of your relationship based on what is the ratio of designers to developers? And developers working with one designer were the happiest, but the opposite wasn't true. I think the single designer working with multiple developers they experienced the relationship was a bit rocky.
I think there's also
that'd be tough.
I think there's also some truth that for a lot of folks, the design to development process is still very much a waterfall, right? In that the design creates something and they hand it off, and then development builds something and then it goes to prod, right? But there's not. So if you're at the beginning of the waterfall, right, then you don't get to keep participating really. Ideally, of course, this would be iterative, it would be collaborative, but I can see where, pardon me, designers would feel less satisfied because they're not getting to participate in the last half, and the half that becomes the final product. You know?
Yeah, that's further away from it for sure.
And they have to see how the developer budget their design.
I know. I wondered if it was just because a lot of teams don't prioritize the end half of after implementation, because there were so many times in my last role where they would promise me, like, we just need this out today. We promise you'll have time to like actually implement the real design. Yes. And after about the third time that something that I just was like gut wrench that was like in production, I was like, I'm just going to build it into my like implementation time. Like there's no more SOS. Like this is because there was so many times that it was devalued to like go back and actually like implement the designs or to have like a good flow. And so I'm wondering if that is common on teams, even if they have designers, if they are like not utilizing them at the end step where it's like, yes, this is accurate. You did good on, I don't know. I'm wondering. I don't know.
I'm surprised that more than a quarter of the projects apparently don't have a designer.
I'm not surprised. Have you seen what the web looks like?
I
That's
mean,
true. That's
I know.
true.
I mean, like, I feel like my husband, for instance, he's a web dev full time, and they don't have a designer on their team, but he like will make comps and wireframes for his team when needed. But his job is not designer, and if he was asked, he is not a designer, but he is like he's doing.
Developers make design decisions all the time, and it might even be working with some sort of framework that allows them to just pull a bunch of components together into a layout, and they're not considering that as being design because they're working in code. But it's making decisions about how things appear and how things work, and that's design.
Yeah.
There's also the aspect that many apps are internal, and for internal apps, like companies just want to apply the brand colors. Usually, they don't need fancy design.
That's
What were you saying?
Yes, that's slap a color on material design.
Yeah.
Yes.
Catherine, if you go to the PDF on page 27, I found this, so I misled you. It turns out that designers who work with just one developer, so the second line, we ask designers how many developers are you working with, and then ask them to rate the quality of their collaboration. And blue is bad. So we see that the biggest blue bar is designers working with just one developer, but also they have the happiest relationship. Perfect relationship is highest. So it seems maybe it's also an interpersonal thing, because you get this one person to work with. If it doesn't work with them, it's really bad.
So, okay, there's a couple things here. One, think about the language we use. Figma says the handover process. Like right there, it's even built into the product. We don't say the collaboration process, the handshake process that like Adekun said, but it's like we say we hand it over, throw it over the wall.
That's so good. That is such a good call out. Oh my gosh.
It's like why does the language end up in the product and then it just gets parroted over and over and over and over again, right? And like, I mean, for me working in design systems, it's like I've been on teams. Most of my teams, it's like one designer, but most of my teams, like my last team, it was like way more designers than developers. Like flip that ratio.
It must have been like heaven.
No, not really.
Wait, what?
Not
what
really.
happened?
Yeah. Well, we were understaffed on the development side, so it was hell.
Okay.
But you had some dang good looking like comps and wireframes, right? Like, you had a good vision.
Most situations I've ever been in have been like, oh, we'll bring Catherine on. She's the designer / developer, so she can do all the design
Do
work.
all of it.
Yeah. And then also develop it.
Yep.
It's like, oh, the one place where I had one other designer on my team, I was like, this is amazing. We're best friends now. Thank God.
That's a good early career tip if anyone is looking to be valuable, is if you can do a little bit of both, then it goes a long way. And I think that also speaks to a lot of the feedback on the designer-developer relationship is so many people are just wanting to speak the same language, wanting to understand more about what the other side is doing, wanting it to be more of a collaborative experience like that.
I think it's harder for the designers because they have to speak develop language to make their point cross, and that is a language they don't understand that much. So there is much more communication overhead on the designers. But it's part of their job. Designing is for a large part doing communication, so they should be good at this. But at the same time, it's hard part, and working with developers is hard. Period. It's like herding cats.
This is always one of my biggest rants, is that the communication burden almost exclusively falls on the designer. Designers are expected to be able to speak the development language and to understand their way around CSS and HTML and the box model, and maybe even a little bit of JavaScript to know what's possible. But very rarely is that courtesy returned. And you see developers that have put in a little bit of work to figure out visual hierarchy and balance and user flows and like
I felt very blessed and very unique to go through. The program I went through was a web dev and design degree, and they start you off with graphic designers in school, and you're taking classes on all the things you just mentioned, and then they split you off when it's time to learn code, because they fully believed, they were like, this shouldn't be, like, this gap shouldn't be, and you should know both sides, and you should be able to do both sides and reach across and help when it's time, like, you, even to the point of, like, can you make a logo, like, all the way to the artsy side versus just a wireframe, like, and learning about, like, fonts and UX flow and accessibility. It was all part of it. And so whenever I graduated, I was like, yeah, that's what it means to be a developer. And then I started working, and I was like, wait, you didn't learn design too? Like, it was very, it was a very harsh awakening. I felt like I was fooled, because they were like teaching what they thought the paradigm should be, not what it was. So,
well, yeah.
Oh, but that's very useful.
Best laid plans.
Well, this is one of the books that I'm currently reading.
Ooh, what is it?
Graphic design.
So you have to translate for us. What were you saying, Kathleen?
It's just best laid plans, because it's like you hear it like in the industry, like designers should code. You should just coding is hard.
I think developers should design too.
So continuing. So yes, like you always hear that in this industry, like designers should code, and like you're saying, yes, developers should design. But when you hear the language of how people talk about it, it's like, well, it's hard to work with developers, and you got to know this language. And it's like, on the opposite side, you know how hard it is to do design speak.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about design speak of you, rather than there's a box to the left and the right, and like you'll hear someone like who's an art director, creative director, has this like, at first blush, everything here is presented in this like linear pattern with all this fluffy terms that
get rid of it. Even the other designers have no clue where this guy is talking about.
I always joke when I moved into development, I started like submitting my first PRs and like doing some of this. People were always like being so kind and so nice with the feedback they would offer me. And I was like, oh, you can be so much meaner than this. I cannot even communicate to you how mean my professors were in art school. Like, no critique you offer.
Really? In my head, because like we talked about your art degree, and in my head it's like they were so like uplifting and just molding of your beautiful creative brain. No,
I can't even emphasize properly how wrong that is. If you ever want to get scoured, show your stuff to a professor.
But that's why I think a lot of designers are very good at justifying themselves and using the fluffy speak in order to be able to back up everything that they do, is because that's what you get taught at art school, is you better have a excuse and a reason behind what you've done to be able to justify your work.
Yeah, it seemed like feelings and vibes are not enough to like ski.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Have you ever tried to put something in front of a client and you're like, I just feel like this is it? They will say the meanest stuff to your face.
The vibes are right with this one, man. Let's take a look.
Well, there's like code review and design critique. Which is why if you've been fortunate enough to actually go to design school and be in those classes, you have had the experience to know how to handle the critique, and like Laura was saying, know how to defend, know how to lay out, here's why.
I actually think it's a really important skill for everyone. It's one of the things that, like, as much as we're poking fun at it, and I think there were some unnecessarily mean critiques from my professors, but overall, I think the ability to articulate why you made the decisions that you made and stand behind them, with forcefulness, and have thought about them and be ready to defend them and explain yourself is an incredibly valuable communication skill that developers can benefit from as well. When it's like, why'd you choose this library? Why'd you choose this architecture pattern? Why'd you set this up like this? To be able to have something more than like, I don't know, vibes felt right. It's like, it's
I
really
wanted
useful.
to try it.
Yeah, it looked cool.
I think if designers explain why they are doing certain things in a certain way, that would help developers a lot. And they don't need to have technical terms for that, but they can say, no, we are using this kind of spacing because we want this effect, and try to shy away from the design language there, but just make it palatable for developers, because developers are used to getting strict lines and know what they're doing and why they are doing it. And if they understand the why, they will build whatever the designer wants.
I agree. I think the why is super important, especially raising a little one who is like actually inquisitive on like, why is that the rules? But I also worry.
You've got a kid that's right in the why.
Because I say so.
Yeah. And like, I swore to myself, I would never be that person that'd be like, because I'm your mom, right? Like, and but it is. But, and it ties back to, I think was it Kathleen who said, but that puts the burden of communication yet again on the designer. Like, now it is your job to not only do your job, but to educate and justify every single time to the developer so that they are on board with you. And like, I don't know how to change, like to flip it so that it is more of like a back and forth, because there does need to be some like educating, because I think once a developer gets a concept, then they can like take that and go forth, and it's not something they should have to learn over and over again. But at the same time, like, it can't just be on the designer side to like
they could always read this book. Sorry. Okay, I'm done promoting my own work.
No, I love it. I think I have it. But I have a physical copy. Hang on.
Spindle got me. He's pitching him. I gotta hit him. But no, I do think there's some truth.
This is a really good advantage of design systems and what we're doing around systematizing design as well. And I think Kathleen will be able to speak more to this, but also that's in the survey is the idea that design systems gives us a really good way to start developing that shared language, have terminology that we understand. It gives developers a way to see reasoning in design, and that there's repeated elements that are so show the intention behind the design and the understanding of alignment, spacing. We actually have a way of formalizing and creating rules around those things, which then in turn makes it far easier for developers to use and understand as well.
I think that's a really good point. I think there's something about developers talk about how much they hate documentation, but I don't actually think that's true. And all a design system is like elaborate documentation for design decisions. And I think it makes it feel more accessible. Ooh, Kathleen, strong disagree.
Strong disagree.
Wait, on which part?
I don't know.
A lot. A lot. When you say a lot, but yeah, I'm gonna. So a design system is not just documentation. Documentation is huge. Running into that right now. Oh my God, am I running into it right now? That's not a bug. We just didn't document it. That's not a bug. We just didn't well, it wasn't documented. But anyway, it's just like, so documentation is huge. But at the same time, a lot of the systematizing, like Laura said, is hugely important. Of like, we have these, these sets of colors, patterns in Figma, and how we've implemented them in code to make it more efficient for you to get your job done. It's like, here's the tooling that we've made for you, and here's why. Here's this package that we've created for you, and here's why. This is why, if you like adopt our package and we do, and you'll always get the updates rather than doing things by hand. It's like it's just more than documenting design decisions. It's creating that system that people, designers and developers can leverage, and hopefully, if the system is maintained, we stop laying off design system practitioners. Well, all my hot takes here. You'll have a system that people can feel confident in and rely on to help them get their work done and show the value to the company to make the money, because that's what companies just want to do. They want profit. It's like, how are we going to help you profit? Systematize it, communicate it.
Also, I think design systems should not be over prescriptive, because I see that a lot. I see design systems that are trying to document or trying to lay down every last pixel. And I'm not talking about pixel perfect design, but they are describing it should be this, and this, and this. They leave out the whys too often, but they want to design everything. And in web, that is just not possible, because there are 20,000 different screen size, at least. I'm probably forgetting another 20,000. There are so many different devices, so many different ways to display color. You cannot design something for all of that, but you have to make something like, hey, this is the way we want to communicate, and show it like this, and be a little bit less persistent in how exactly something needs to look, but give more of a guidance like, hey, we are designing it like this because this is the end result we want to see, and the end result will be different on. Be aware that the end result will be different on every device.
I think it's interesting. We got. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think that is. Go ahead.
No, I'm still shut up. No, don't shut up. That's what I got you on.
Am I going to you?
What is too prescriptive? That I would love to hear your definition of too prescriptive, because I think everyone has a different definition of that. Like, what is your definition of too prescriptive versus because that's a very wide spectrum. So, in your opinion, what is it? In your experience, actually, because
in my experience, it is that developer that a design system says, hey, these buttons need to be like 120 pixels wide, and then I go, 120 pixels wide, that is widely different on all kinds of screens. Why is it so? Why is it stating 120 pixels? Why is it not stating like, okay, this amount of space, this needs to be like 20% of the screen? So I'm not sure that I'm explaining it right, but sometimes the design is demanding things that are not fitting for all the devices we need to program against. And that is what I mean by overly precise.
I think it's interesting. We got a couple comments in the chat that I think align with this, right? Thindle says a lot of developers feel very set on pixel perfect design, but then immediately before that was like, how long have you guys been using Figma? It's like, boy, if I got to tell you, these are two problems that are interrelated, right? I think the struggle point is that design tools are incredibly different than development tools, right? And design tools are evolving, and Figma, I think, is actually a really good example of one that has been moving towards doing a better job of representing responsive design and fluid design, different screen sizes. But ultimately, nothing is going to be perfect. And when you're designing, it's pretty static. Even the most interactive prototype is going to be relatively static compared to a finished coded application. And so you've got this kind of tooling gap where it's like, as a designer, you're often kind of forced to work in pixels to play nice with the systems that you're working within. As a developer, you're right, that doesn't always translate well or make sense, or it's not the right fit for what you're building. But everyone's just trying to work with the tools that they've got. So.
I'm quite biased towards Penpot right now because I've been working with them, but Penpot is doing some interesting things with layout in terms of implementing flex and grid layout, the CSS spec flex and grid layout, and things like design tokens, using the specs so that it can increase that shared language and have that collaboration be closer and get designers working in the sort of units and frameworks that developers understand. And I do think that's a really interesting approach.
I might have to give them I looked at Penpot admittedly a few years ago. They felt relatively new and mostly at that point like a Figma clone. And it was interesting, and I think that's important to have open source. And so I was like, glad you're here. But ultimately, it wasn't quite on the same in terms of, it wasn't quite offering as much as Figma was offering at that point. And so I was like, cool concept, glad it's here. And I stuck with Figma, but maybe I need to come back around.
I think in the next few months, I think we're starting to reach that point where people will be switching. Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. I haven't even heard of it. So I just went to, it's Penpot, penpot.app is the site.
And I believe Laura has created a whole bunch of great ways to learn some tips and tricks on how to rock it in Penpot. So I would highly recommend look at any of the content that Laura has created on this.
Oh, thank you, Kathleen.
Yes. So Sander, about the I was thinking about your buttons thing. Like buttons should be, X. You're getting this prescriptive, like too prescriptive. Sometimes it could be not prescriptive enough. Like, for example, I've seen a system where you have buttons designed, but they don't even have a min width. So you'll see a layout in Figma where like the buttons are like perfectly aligned. You know, they're perfectly aligned because the designer decided that these two buttons will be like, I don't know, like not 120, like let's say 120 pixels right now, 120 pixels wide. But if you see the component in a storybook example, they're like, wait, why is one, like why is your secondary button not as wide as the primary? Or, like why the width's off? Oh, because the button was coded just to expand according to the length of whatever label you put in there. Wait, how could that be a problem? So it's like there's this, if you even are like not prescriptive at all and don't document why you're not prescriptive, that can also, you can run into issues there of like, where's the happy medium, in between.
I really hope we are moving to a world where designers understand a little bit more of CSS and use things like flexbox and grid layout stuff, because that will make things so much easier on the developer side, and it will line up perfectly where as the designer wants it.
Perfectly timed with Thindle's comment.
Yeah, but a lot of designers do know CSS. It's a misnomer that they don't. I think I'm just coming from the happy medium where I know both. So it's like, it's designers do know how to code and developers do know how to design, and it's a tool like CSS, programming language for us all. Please use vanilla CSS.
I like Sass.
Sass. Just don't use that one that you could with a stiff breeze.
We throw a little Tailwind shade. I'm gonna throw a little Tailwind shade.
I was gonna say Tailwind is like one of the things that has for some people that I know has saved working with React, because they loved writing like CSS and custom designs, but then when they were like in the React space, it was extremely painful, and so Tailwind kind of saved the React space for them. So no doubt, I know there's a lot of Tailwind.
I'm
a fan of Thindle right now.
I think the other thing we gotta acknowledge, this is a biased group, right? This was for the most part a group of designers who can develop and developers who can design, right?
So and I have a reason though. I've just never liked it, and I am in a position where I have to work with it every day. I have to work with it every day, and I'm pulling my hair out. It's like, what could go wrong? And why did you put Tailwind in a design system? What could go wrong? There's no specificity. Yeah.
Tailwind in a design system?
Yeah.
You're breaking, Sander.
It's a therapy session now.
Yeah. Let it out. This is a safe space.
Let me tell you.
I thought we were professionals here.
Well, no, you've seen there are systems that use it. There are reasons against using like the coolest tool, or the coolest tool that has the loudest voice of 15 pages of justification of why you should use it, versus you never see that with CSS of like, or any other, like even modules, you don't see 15 pages of justification of why you should use this. So
I think
that is simply because you have to. It's in the browser and you need to use it anyway. So
I think when we get to the accessibility and talk about the survey that they've done there, and it's interesting because they do have some statistics on the use of Bootstrap and the effect on accessibility. Now, you can't
I really want to see that. Can we just pull it up now, Laura?
You can't necessarily detect Tailwind with an automated crawler. That's not necessarily going to be visible in your source code. So, but I would be interested to know. And of course, with these surveys, I think correlation, causation, it's not necessarily the same thing. But I think I think with and Bootstrap has been year on year with the issues in this one. They've been having. I find my.
Or is it under framework?
I wrote it down
there
somewhere.
It is. I found it.
Yeah, and I think below they've said homepages in the sample that utilize the popular Bootstrap framework had 12.9 more accessibility errors on average than those that did not.
Wow.
And obviously, they say we can't know from the data if Bootstrap introduced these errors, but there was a correspondence of increased errors. And I think that obviously Tailwind and Bootstrap have similarities there.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's the use of the tool, but I think it's to some degree inherent in the why are you using the tool? Are you using Tailwind because you don't know CSS well enough or don't have the confidence to implement it? And maybe that's reflective of your understanding of accessibility or your understanding of HTML. And perhaps that could be a correlation with other frameworks as well.
I feel like that could be a pull quote. I just want to like asterisk everything you just said. It was beautiful, Laura.
Well, I think this is actually the perfect segue into the accessibility section. But before we do, I want to give one last kind of shout if like anyone had any last things to throw in on the design front before we officially bump things over.
I just want to finish with one practical takeaway from the Designer Developer Collaboration Survey, and that was that designers and developers who communicate daily have the most effective relationship. They are the guys that don't say, so this is page
thank you.
17.
I was just going to scroll through until I found it. What page?
I think 17. Let me just check. 21 of the report. So
Nora
you
came
see
super prepared.
cross-section, how they rate the quality of their collaboration versus how often they communicate. And you see the second row, daily, they don't have any negativity in their relationship. They have the biggest perfect relationship rating among the group. And I think that's something that we should all take away in, like the people that we want to collaborate smoothly with, we just need to communicate. It can be that simple.
The handoff between weekly and a few times a month is strange, at least.
Wait, you're saying it's strange, the difference between
weekly and a few times a month? Because weekly there are 7% perfect relations, and a few times a month 26.
Yeah, but it says or less often. So I think that's also catching groups that communicate, once every other month.
Once a year.
I think it's catching. This is the other category that's catching some strays, I think. But yeah, the decline or like the dip is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty solid jump. It almost doubles, right? So if you're talking daily, no problems, you'll have almost twice as many problems moving to weekly and twice as many problems that moving to every now and again, basically, is what we could call that last category. Once in a blue moon. It's simultaneously reassuring and deeply frustrating that the answer is just talk to each other.
or don't talk at all, right? This is what I'm getting from this, right? Like either I'm kidding, totally kidding.
Yeah, so you could, I think this
just handle,
over
throw
here
it in the waterfall.
Those guys are just completely oblivious to any problems.
I know. I think because like if you were to ask, because there are teams, we have so many teams at our company. If you were to ask me like, how's your working relationship with someone that I only talk to once a quarter, I'd be like, amazing.
Great.
What is there to complain about, right? Like I don't work with them, right? So I don't know if we can take that into account here. I think we can just get out. Yeah.
It's a really good point. Yeah, I personally have a great working relationship with our CEO who has never spoken to him.
See, exactly. That's it. It's a great relationship.
Your besties. It's going perfect. I quite genuinely have no complaints.
You're getting everything you need out of that relationship. Yep.
Yep. Well said. All right. Well, in that case, I'm gonna flip us back over, and we can move truly.
And with that, I just want to say goodbye because my daughter is coming in any second. So nice chatting with all of you.
Nora.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Let the healing begin.
Yeah.
Accessibility.
Let's go. Laura kicked us off with a great call out on accessibility on these stats. I thought this was so interesting. Just between this section with the web frameworks, the JavaScript libraries, and the like other tools here, and what correlation they had or did not have with the finding of errors on pages. I was like, that was a really interesting correlation to me. And I know, right, correlation, not causation, and all these kinds of things. But it was cool to see which ones were perhaps more prone to having accessibility errors.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be that even in the documentation for some of these frameworks, some of them do actually speak to accessibility and try to encourage and educate about accessibility to some degree amongst their documentation. They're trying. And I think that's a really positive influence. And yeah, sometimes we're using frameworks because we need shortcuts, and shortcuts and accessibility don't tend to mix particularly well, because you need to be considering like the meaning of what you're building in order to be able to convey it programmatically for assistive technologies. And in design, you need to have made sure that if it's been designed with accessibility in mind, that those intentions have been translated through to the final product as well.
I see AngularJS on the list, and I'm wondering if there's a correlation, because I know how old AngularJS is, and that it's like, if you're still on version, that's 1.0 of Angular. Yeah. That's when I was in college, like 10 years ago. Like, if you're still on that version of Angular, what else are you still on? What have you not touched? What have you not touched in 10 years? No wonder you're right. So that's where I'm wondering, like, how many of these could be said the same for? I don't honestly, like, I keep hearing about GSAP. Is that related to GreenSock? Is that totally different?
It is GreenSock.
It is GreenSock. Oh, okay.
It's
okay. Thank
GreenSock
you.
animation
program.
Okay.
I don't remember what the P stands for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thing. But yeah, no, those are the same. And that's also not, I like GSAP actually quite a lot. That's my tool to reach for advanced animation. But I think there's also, right, some correlation. Anytime you're doing advanced animation, you're starting to move into a space that's going to inherently be less accessible for some. I think. Feel free to contradict me.
Yeah, there's of course ways to accommodate it and be able to do things like reducing motion and recognizing that setting so that you're not forcing people to see the animation if they don't want to. Right. I also think with the Angular side of it, I was thinking back to what Sander said earlier about the correlation between the types of projects that you're more likely to use Angular on. And so if these are often massive and mature projects that maybe have a lot of people working on them as well, maybe then you're maybe more likely to introduce accessibility errors as well.
I can speak a little bit for Angular here, because Angular is making it easy to do the right thing, and it makes it harder to do the wrong thing. But for accessibility, the right thing for one person is the wrong thing for another person, and that is not helping getting a perfect score in accessibility. Also, this thing is surprising to me, because a couple of those things have nothing to do with UI at all. So I have no clue why they influence the accessibility. I mean, Backbone is purely data. React.js is how do you load your JavaScript modules. It has nothing to do with the UI.
I know. I wonder, because you said like earlier about it could just be a correlation that may or may not be there.
I think it's hard, and they do caveat that in these, is that it's very likely to be a correlation. It's basically, these are things that can be detected that are being used in the source code. So anything that is not detectable in the source code, if it gets generated out, if there's no little label or little sort of credit in the comments or whatever, then of course it's not going to be able to be detected if there's not a third-party script or something like that. Actually, third-party scripts is a very interesting category of the advertising networks, fingerprinting technologies and tracking technologies. There's clear correlations between problems with those. Google AdSense being a long-time criminal.
I had no idea that was so terrible.
And it's showing you the difficulty when you're introducing third-party things that you have no control over, that you're not going to necessarily be able to affect the accessibility experience of that as well. But also, they raise a really interesting point in this survey specifically, where they said, well, it's possible also that people that are more concerned about accessibility are also more concerned about respecting privacy. And so there's probably a correlation there that you're going to take more care if you do care about these things. That's that section there. Oh, cookie compliance as well, they talked about too. Something that we have a lot in the EU is a lot of cookie banners and things like that, and that's a lot of scripts going on.
Yep, Thindo was actually just mentioning that in the same breath as talking about the European Accessibility Act that's coming in just a few months, right?
Yeah.
So, very soon, very soon.
Yeah, and I think cookie banners they're more a sign of something that's bad rather than something that's good.
Cookie banners miss the mark. They serve little to no purpose,
and they're largely not implemented in a way that's actually true to the regulation. It's more of a weaseling around it, and that's what a cookie banner is a sign of. It's we want to track you.
I say those were a result of the GDPR stuff, right?
Yes.
Which is I'm going to try and remember something data protection regulation.
Yeah, general. So
Thank
the
you.
General data protection
I'm
regulation.
nailing it on knowing
in Europe.
3/4 of every acronym.
That's better than my ratio.
Yeah. I can tell you almost what everything stands for. I have approximate knowledge of many things. So
It's interesting that you say that, Laura, about cookies, because in my mind it's like I know what kind of things in like a spa I need to like capture and put in a cookie. Okay, in order to be compliant, yes, I am using cookies. Like, so it's odd to me to think about, I guess, bad actors in that space, because it's not where my brain jumps to with things like that.
Yeah, and you don't need to request permission for cookies that are not collecting personal data, and that are just part of the functionality. And so part of the problem is that we treat all cookies as these kinds of cookies, whereas actually if you are not doing anything like that could be collecting or using personal data, then you probably don't need to be showing a cookie banner at all. But that kind of dividing things up in this way is not necessarily straightforward for everyone. And so they're like, well, we may as well just ask for broad permission for everything, and then we're covered.
I think that's where it goes, right? I think that's the safety of like, just have the banner, just do it, like with a lot of things.
Yeah. Which I think is interesting as well in this particular page, that part of the page that's highlighted here is about accessibility overlays as well, which I think has really gained in popularity over the last few years. And these are these overlays. It's like a button that often has a little accessibility icon or something. And the idea is, and it's the promise, not what actually gets delivered.
Oh no!
Is that you press these and it makes everything accessible. But the problem is that I think as most developers will understand, you're not going to be able to change the entire composition of a website just by pressing a button.
But also, why wouldn't you just be there already? Like, is there a reason to not just be there? Why are you toggling in and out of accessibility mode? Like, is it animations we're stripping out? Or
another great point. Well, it's the idea that it might introduce high contrast. It might be able to maybe use AI to add alt text to your images if you haven't got them there already, and a lot more things. But fundamentally, they don't work. So I will leave the commentary to people that are far more intelligent and well argued. There is a website that is called overlayfactsheet.com, and I would recommend you check that out. But I think one of the interesting things is that when they have in this survey here, they have a list of some of the overlays that they've a lot of sites use, because it's part of the homepage. And so when they test the accessibility, it's going to trigger this overlay. And so the results include the results using those overlays. And some of them actually intentionally block the automated checker. They try to create.
Are you serious?
Results.
Yeah,
because it's in their interest to do so. They're financially interested.
Wow.
If you are talking to accessibility experts, they will all tell you there is no working overlay software. So if you try to do accessibility and you want to do it by slapping on overlay, that is not going to work. You will still have to do the work to make your site or your application accessible.
A lot of times.
But what's
people
interesting in this sentence here, it does say websites with common accessibility overlays detected averaged fewer detectable errors than average. And so, interestingly, even though people are using these overlays on their pages are still more accessible, like from an automated testing perspective. However, that may also speak to if an organization cares enough to put an overlay on their site in the first place, then perhaps they're already working towards more accessible, like broadly.
No, the thing that happens is that the overlays know what the automated tools are looking for, and they are gaming the system. That is what happens. For real.
Yeah,
I'm not making this up.
It does say here that they have disabled those overlays for this particular test, but who knows? Yeah. They can game these things. There's a lot of dodgy things going on out there.
I'm just like imagining, because you were like, yeah, they like purposefully like block these. I'm imagining like that dev ticket rolling up, like to just like implement the block, like so that people can't test your accessibility.
I think a lot of times, right, when people reach for these overlays, it's often a legacy website that somebody does not feel that they have time to go back and do correctly.
Okay, that makes sense. Versus something brand new that you're making, and I'm like, why wouldn't you just implement it? Okay, this totally...
You would. This is oh my god, European Accessibility Act is coming. We have to get in compliant.
Okay.
I'm gonna hire this third-party company who's gonna throw an overlay on our site, and then like we can check a box.
And then we're in compliance.
I think they did get sued. One of the big ones did get sued very recently in the US for false advertising. So I would bear that in mind if you're going to use it to help prevent you from getting fined, because I'm not sure that it will protect you well enough.
I don't think so. I think regulation is going to puncture through this and say, no, you need to be really accessibility, and this is not enough. There will be a gray period here, but in the end, especially in Europe, the governments will say, no, this will not do. And there are a lot of accessibility experts that are pointing out that, hey, those overlays are not doing what they are supposed to do, and they are not helping your accessibility. And as you said, there are less errors on those sites because they already started on it, and then they found out, oh, this stuff is hard. Is there an easy way out? Enter the overlay, which is not an easy way out, but
I think plenty of people do it for good intentions as well.
Do you think this will push accessibility forward, not just like in general for all countries, like across the board, since people are like, well, we have to do it for this, so...
Yeah, in the way that I think that the regulation around data protection in the EU has kind of made a bit of a lowest common denominator approach for a lot of companies. Nobody has time to develop a different version of their website for every different jurisdiction. So to some degree, it can be helpful to, unless it's massively going to impact your financial benefit, what most organizations care about, then it kind of makes sense to, okay, well, if we are good in this jurisdiction, then we'll be good in other jurisdictions, and we'll I think hopefully once they say a rising tide lifts all boats. That's in my optimistic self. That's what I would love.
I love it.
That would be nice. Your
also, less JavaScript helps a lot, because a lot of inaccessibility comes from the JavaScript side of things, and that is not a framework thing, but it is.
That's true. I would say. Just percentage-wise, if we're looking at this
a lot of red
libraries chart, it is mostly bad.
And knowing HTML, if we go
Just
back to the designers
HTML.
and developers speaking the same language, I really think that if designers have some understanding of HTML, I think that that's also a benefit. And it's not, in the grand scheme of things you can learn in development, HTML is relatively simple if you're just thinking about an understanding of the elements you can use and the meaning behind them. Heading levels, that's a big one in this survey, because heading levels are how assistive technology, like screen readers, often navigate a page, is relying on heading levels to provide them with a hierarchy. So you've got your H1 is your top level heading. You want one of those. And then underneath you have H2s, and then nested underneath those are H3s, and having that structure and hierarchy is really useful if you're trying to navigate a huge amount of text with assistive technology. And so if designers just have an understanding of heading levels and how to use those and direct a developer to this is the heading level I want, that could make a big difference.
In addition to that, like if you're partnering with a designer, like developer partnering with designer about design, saying, also talking about the importance of semantics versus presentation. Because understanding that you can, under the hood, this should render like this, but you can style it differently. Having that discussion is really important.
I feel like that goes often back, though, to a lack of an actual user experience engineer person role on the team that talks about, because there's so often that I'll be pulled in to look through a flow, and I'll be like, okay, cool, but how is this page used? What data is actually supposed, and why is this a toggle? This is 3 states and you're representing it with a toggle. What is going on here? So I think it goes back to we don't have a specific person, and so then it kind of falls to the wayside and it's hobbled together. And is it accessible? Where are you using the right? I would love.
Why is every form field in 6 divs nested?
I know, and that's whenever you started talking about headers, Laura, I was like, oh, there's. It depends on what are you using? What design system are you using? What are you using Bootstrap? What are you using? And then the layers and the nesting and cleaning that up alone, for what it's doing, just kind of makes me hyperventilate. So you talking about headings, I was like, oh, this is too much.
It's nested in 6 divs because you're using Tailwind.
She went there.
Okay, I'm done.
You're really gonna do it.
We gotta do it. We're here to provoke anger.
Every header is a H1 with Tailwind crap on it. Yes.
All my homies hate Tailwind.
In the comments, Heather Neff is talking about annotations and the importance of that, which is a very, very good point.
Alyssa and I are both trying to click.
Here it comes.
And
which it is important, but it also, again, we're getting back to handoff versus collaboration and that shared education. So it's important to have that, but also it still feels a little handholdy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think everyone in our industry should learn HTML and how to build a semantic HTML page, because so many problems are stemming from things that have just way too much DOM for what they need to do.
Oh, yeah.
You can cut out 60% of the page and don't miss a little thing.
And that goes for developers too. The developers can make a huge amount is built in natively to HTML and web browsers. And a lot of the time people are taking it out and reapplying it with whatever JavaScript framework they're using, and they're not making the most of something that's cross-platform natively.
That is exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah, why would I use a button if I can use a div?
Div role equals button. Button as link.
Yeah.
Vendel was saying the same thing. He was like, radio buttons displayed as checkboxes. And that's, where you go okay, but that there's a semantic element for this, right? That works accessibly if you just use it. You just got to use it. You just got to on the page.
You don't love a div with an on click.
It's almost as bad as the headings talk where I'm just
yeah. Extremely tough.
Well, it's it's there's a lack of understanding of these HTML elements. They're not just an element that's just like the element fairy just is here's this thing. It's there is a lot of work under the hood from the browser engineers to say, here is the element, and under the hood it does all these things for you. Yeah. So it's not just this, it's not thing that is markup. It's actually doing a lot of programming for you. It's just syntactic sugar.
Yeah, Vindel says, just give me my table-based layouts back.
No.
We have some spacer gifts. Some spacer
email
gifts.
development is still there, and you can go do it.
I'll give you a pixel. You can use it to space things out.
I do.
Now I'm hyperventilating. When we used to use Flash and web fonts as well. Remember
that? That's a good one. That's it. I know. Like, honestly, web standards have come a long way. Like, I'm so thankful.
Oh, image mapping. Yeah.
Right. Well, I was thinking about that right when we were talking about.
But now we have grids with cold span and row span, so.
And these like phones that had like
can build something tabular without
buttons or like dial.
We were talking about that. Like the majority of developers, at least that took the State of JS survey, didn't know a world outside of modern JavaScript. All of this was not something they ever touched or had to deal with, unless maybe like me. Did a couple of years in the email dev minds, then yeah.
Although, I have seen things that are tabular that should be a table that are built with divs and grids.
Agree. I think it did swing the other way. I think people have a little bit of PTSD with tables. I will be the first to admit it. Yes.
Yeah, there's still a good use for floats out there if you're working with images sometimes.
She said it here, folks. Oh, coming in with the spice.
What is the good use for floats?
Oh my God, come on, man.
You want to flow some text around an image? It's still the easiest way. One line of CSS.
God bless you.
Vindel agrees with you. I'm in the outs.
Me and Vindel on the same page.
I gotta start floating more stuff.
This is why it is important to have industry veterans continuing to be in the industry, because we did not have the tools back then that are, ready for us now. It's like you're putting things together with like spit and tape, to make things work, because you only had the tools. It's like you only could do tables. Like even there was no like anti-aliased images. You had to use things like the Babelizer. You had to, slice up images to actually build them. You couldn't just like pop it in a page. There's just so many things you had to do to make something work that you became very resourceful.
Man, that sliced image layout, like that takes me back, man. That was a good.
But I think there's some truth that like knowing where we were and why we made the decisions that we made and why the industry has evolved in certain directions makes a lot of sense. Because every now and again you'll see someone talk about, well, why don't we do micro front ends anymore? Or why are we doing server side rendering again? Or this, that, and the other. It's like, well, if you look, we kind of did this, then we did this, and then we moved here. And we tried this and it didn't work. And,
Do you
we
guys...
go in circles.
No, see that, Sander, someone told me when I was talking about that, especially with the server side thing, I was like, it's like a pendulum. We're going back and forth. And they're like, nah, man, it's a spiral. Because we learned from like when we were a spa, and then we learned like even before that when we were just server side, and we're like constantly like rising up and like learning new things. And I feel like all of front end is like that, even though if you're like, wait, this is really familiar, like 10 years ago but it has learned and grown. It is not the server side from when you were a kid, right? Like it's different now. But I wanted to like see if
slightly better, but
yeah.
We're moving on up.
We're moving up. I'm wondering if anyone has any advice though, because it feels like the answer to a lot of our problems is, like it's better communication in order to achieve better collaboration, and it's educating yourself and not holding others responsible for that. But like, is there any, like, if someone can walk away with like one thing just to do better, like, because it's a lot, like for me, I'm just looking at it of like, we have come so far, but there is still so far to go. So did anybody have advice or like a tidbit of like, I would focus on this, or I would work on this?
I would focus on what is available in the browsers nowadays. If you look at learn your HTML, learn your CSS. If you learn those two things, you can throw out so much JavaScript. This pop-up things, you don't need any JavaScript for those things again. Those pop-up tile things, dialogues, you don't need a you need a single line for a dialogue, a pop-up model. These are available in the browser. Use it, because you're shipping JavaScript to a browser for things that it knows how to do. And that is just a waste. And the nice thing about the things in the browser is they are accessible from the get-go. A little bit less on the dialogue, but they are getting there. And what you build, you become responsible for the accessibility and for everything, and that's hard. It's don't do that if it's not needed. If something is available in the browser, if something is available with CSS, just use the platform. And I think that's the most important thing you can do for yourself. Just learn HTML, just learn CSS, a little bit more CSS than you know right now. But start with HTML. There is so much in HTML that people have no idea of that you can do with little to no effort. So.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going off my soapbox.
It's a good soapbox. I agree.
Yeah.
Fundamentals are huge. Like knowing your HTML, knowing your CSS, knowing the fundamentals of JavaScript. Always having that base, because the tools will come and go. But if you have the fundamentals and the growth mindset, thanks Bootcamp. You have that growth mindset, you will be able to be curious and learn and take those fundamentals and apply it to whatever framework or technology comes through. And you can say, oh, this framework has a good pattern for me, or maybe it's not a great pattern for me, but I can use this part of the framework versus that part of the framework, because sometimes you don't have a choice. You do have to use a framework, because your employer's like, you have to use this, but you can use it responsibly if you know the fundamentals.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd add to that. So a complimentary point to the two of you is, I would say, shortcuts aren't always the win that you think they are, and they can come back and bite you. And so while you think this is going to make it faster today, I'm going to just use this thing and I'll be able to deploy really quickly and have something out there. And then what's coming back to bite you is that the designers who are complaining because you've not implemented everything that they wanted, is that the accessibility, because you've decided that you just want to use an overlay or not pay attention to that. Like, is it that you're using a framework that's maybe not even mature enough yet, and you're being bitten by bugs and all sorts coming back at you? It feels boring to be always saying, like, yes, the fundamentals and the HTML, and don't take shortcuts, do it the long way, the boring way, but you're going to end up with a much more robust solution in the end.
Yeah,
Well,
totally.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to add, be wary of any third parties. Shy away as much as possible from all third parties. There are a couple of good ones, there are a couple of that are well maintained and so on, but the majority of third parties is not needed, not maintained, or will not be maintained in the foreseeable future. Be careful. If you cannot maintain it yourself, don't use it.
Bindle's calling us out in chat, making me laugh.
Yeah,
third parties that you don't understand how they work, I believe, is what I heard.
No, the thing is, there are some good third parties that provide support, but there are boatloads of third parties that don't provide any support. And if you cannot deliver the support yourself, just don't use it.
Yeah, because it is you volunteering, right? Like, if it is not maintained by a specific group of people designated to it, then that's you, right? Like, it's or it should be.
That was the biggest shift I saw, right? That's the difference between being an individual contributor and moving up in your career to become a tech lead or a manager, is that you have to start thinking longer term. And you're not just, how do I write this one feature and get this shipped and get my PR approved and merged? It's making long-term decisions for the health of a product and the health of a team. And that's move on up.
I've heard about POs that are being paid per feature they deliver. And I go like, that's the most insane thing you can do as a company, because that is not going to grow long-lasting or maintainable programs. But that is what it is. I think we are pretty much done.
I think on that lovely note, That might be the perfect place to put a bow on it. You guys really did the hard work for us. You transitioned us into the accessibility section.
Yep.
You wrapped up with a really solid talk about responsibility and making intelligent choices. And it's like, yeah, well, I can't top that. And it's almost top the hour. So why fight with fate? You guys did it perfectly.
Thank you for taking the time to come on stream with us. We appreciate each one of you. Seriously. Thank you.
Thanks for having
us.
It was a joy being here.
Yep, and thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat. We will of course be posting these on YouTube and everything. You can watch them all later if you missed a part or if you want to share it with your friends. But we genuinely love when everyone participates in the chat. That makes it fun and not like we're just talking into the void. So glad for all of you who joined us and participated, all of you who joined us and watched silently. We love you too. We will see you guys on the next one. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.